Hello, beautiful people. This is Job chapter 2. First, I'm going to do a recap of chapter 1 real quick, and then we're going to see the persecutor's second audience with God. We're going to see his second challenge. We're going to see his personal attack on Job, and then his wife and how she responds to it. And finally, what happens to Job, and how do his friends respond? Let's dig in. First, let me get out of the frame, and I'm going to show you a recap right here. So, in chapter 1, we saw that the persecutor coordinated a full-scale attack from every side. From the south, the Sabaeans. From the north, the Chaldeans. From the sky, fire. And from all four corners, the wind. What happened? He was cornered. There was no escape. It was unavoidable trial. And now we get to chapter 2. Let's read it. This is the Berean Standard Bible Translation. My favorite, if you didn't know that. On another day, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. "Where have you come from?" said the Lord to the persecutor. I forgot I'm saying persecutor instead of Satan. Remember that. Because Satan and devil just has too much baggage. I interrupted myself. Forgive me. Let me dive in. "Where have you come from?" said the Lord to the persecutor. "From roaming through the earth," he replied, "and walking back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to the persecutor, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one on earth like him, a man who is blameless and upright, who fears God and shuns evil. He still retains his integrity, even though you incited me against him to ruin him without cause." "Skin for skin," the persecutor replied. "A man will give up all he owns in exchange for his life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." "Very well," said the Lord to the persecutor. "He's in your hands, but you must spare his life." So the persecutor went out from the presence of the Lord and infected Job with terrible boils from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. And Job took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself as he sat among the ashes. Then Job's wife said to him, "Do you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die." "You speak as a foolish woman speaks," he told her. "Should we accept from God only good and not adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Now when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all this adversity that had come upon him, each of them came from his home, and they met together to go and sympathize with Job and comfort him. When they lifted up their eyes from afar, they could barely recognize Job. They began to weep aloud, and each man tore his robe and threw dust in the air over his head. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, but no one spoke a word to him because they saw how intense his suffering was. What a chapter, right? Well, as we saw, Job already has suffered a lot of loss, mainly, property, material loss, but also their children. And so in this chapter, we see another scene, another throne room scene. The sons of God, it says in Hebrew, come before God, as well as the persecutor. Now, in the Greek translation of the Bible, it also the earliest manuscripts, if I understand correctly, actually translate this angels, messengers, which is the New Testament word for angels, for messengers, angelos, I believe. And just to make sure it wasn't, nobody thought, oh, these are like children of God, or, that it wasn't confused that way. Some of the later Greek texts, I believe, also say sons of God. It's written in there, but just to sync up with the Hebrew. But So just to be clear, these are not like human beings, children of God, okay? But they approach him, and here the persecutor comes again, same thing. And you know this is something I noticed about him. He's wandering throughout the earth. It reminded me of Genesis, where Cain, who the first murderer, God showed him some grace, mercy and grace, and put a mark on him so nobody would mess with him, but he sent him away from his presence. And so how apropos that the persecutor also seems to be wandering around the earth away from God's presence. Similar character there. So, interestingly, God repeats what he says about Job's character. God has not changed his mind. It's only reinforced about who Job is. But, and this time he acknowledges, well, even though you incited me, okay, he retains his integrity. So, Job's proven himself. But the enemy, well, I already read the scripture. He's like, well, you didn't touch him. You didn't let me touch him directly. So that's what he's asking for. And God lets him do that. Guys, this is a sober part of the story. Things happen in this life. It's rough. I got a family member right now who's physically afflicted, suffering from cancer, and it's really difficult. Stage 4, it's really difficult. And, I just pray. I pray that this family member would look to God and look to trust him. So, what happens? We don't know exactly what it is. I don't think we need any kind of medical diagnosis, but he's got these sores and he's scraping himself with pottery. It's a pretty gruesome picture. But obviously he's suffering. And what I wanted to highlight here about his wife, when I read this years ago at first, and for a long time I thought, well, Job's wife, she's really, one of kind of adversarial character in this story. And only in this new study did I realize I see her from a different point of view. And what I want to do here in this video is ask you, along with me, to step into the shoes of each of these people. Okay? I think we've already talked a lot about Job to try to step into his shoes. This will get really interesting in the later chapters, but for a moment I want to step into her shoes. As I said in the past, I thought she was kind of this adversarial character, but upon rereading and really reflecting on this story, I realized, well, Job's wife is the mother of these 10 children, and she's also grieving. Everything that he lost, she lost. They're partners. Isn't that what marriage is? You're equal partners. And he was this rich industrialist. Well, so was she. They were living life together, their husband and wife. And so, I think it's easy for us to sympathize with Job because it's so clear how he's suffering. The text doesn't really describe how his wife is suffering, but clearly she's also suffering loss. She's lost everything. They've come to ruin. They lost all their children. She's grieving. The difference is, obviously, she's not dealing with it well. To the point where she's reached her limit. This book is all about perseverance. That's what the book of James tells us in the New Testament. It talks about Job's perseverance. Well, she hit her limit. Guys, I have limits. You have limits. Isn't that what life does? The challenges of life, they stretch us. They test us, we fail. Isn't that what happens when you go to the gym? You work out, you hit a limit, and then your muscles grow back stronger so you can run farther, you can lift more, you can exercise longer to build up your endurance. She hit the limit of her endurance. And so when she says, do you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die. I just thought that was like the most cruel thing to say. And it is very cruel. But I don't believe she's saying this out of hatred for him. I believe she's saying this out of despair. She's saying this out of her own failure to be able to continue faithfully. So, and I will just preview. I don't want to really detail the end here, but he doesn't divorce his wife. In this story, from beginning to end, they're always together. Their marriage doesn't fall apart because of this trial. They stay married, and they continue life together. Okay, so she's not the enemy. The enemy is the persecutor. This is a spiritual battle. And guys, I've been married more than a few decades, and there have been many times in our marriage where, we had disagreement, we're fighting, we're arguing, or just there was some conflict. And I realized, we're not each other's enemy. We're in this together. We're partners. The enemy is the persecutor. Okay? Satan, the devil. Like, that's the enemy, and we got to stop fighting each other and be unified. So, it's a different perspective on Job's wife that I've come to, and I'm very grateful for that. Put yourself in her shoes. How would you be feeling right now when you can't go any further, and you see your spouse stubbornly being faithful? Maybe you get a little upset, okay? Sometimes we get upset at the other person because they're right and we're not, right? Or they're doing better than we are. They're handling the situation better than we are, and we just want somebody to take it out on. It's a sad truth, right? Put yourself in their shoes. Okay. By the way, when she says, curse God and die, some teachers, preachers, interpreters suggest that she's telling him to kill himself. That's not what the text says. This is a passive Hebrew verb. My studies show it's not like, end yourself. No, it's just end. It's just die, not like kill yourself. Okay, it's just a passive giving up. She's basically saying, just quit. Just give up already. Okay? Finally, his friends. Guys, I want to just say, like, these guys, similar to his wife, I used to think, well, these guys are fair weather friends, aren't they? Because as we continue reading, you'll see they aren't the most supportive. But I tell you what, they start well, and they have incredible intentions, and they do go quite far at the beginning. I want to just repeat a little bit of what the text says here. They heard about this adversity, and each of them came from their home. You notice they didn't send a messenger with a message to give their condolences to their friend. They didn't send their spouse with flowers, their wives. They didn't do any of those things. They said, I'm going to go see my friend myself. And you know what, guys? Let's go together. So they met together to go and sympathize with Job and comfort him. Wow, that's pretty amazing. These are real friends. And similar to his wife, as we'll see in the story, he doesn't disown them. I'll just leave it at that. They always stay friends. But sometimes you have a disagreement with friends. Sometimes you'll have a disagreement with a friend. It doesn't mean the friendship has to end. And they have some strong disagreements that we'll see. The friendship doesn't have to end. So I want to encourage you, if you're the friend showing up to comfort somebody suffering, or if you're the person suffering, just because maybe your friend doesn't understand or you don't understand what somebody's going through, it's good to show up. It's good to sympathize. It's good to comfort. And if you hit some bumps in that process, it doesn't mean the friendship has to end. And look at their response. They lift up their eyes from afar. They could barely recognize Job. Boy, these sores from head to toe. Like, for them to not even be able to recognize him, barely recognize him, wow, this must have been a very serious condition. They began to weep aloud. Can you imagine? 3 grown men just sobbing as they approached their friend who's suffering. And each man tore his robe and threw dust in the air over his head. This is an act of grieving. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, just sitting on the ground for a whole week straight. This is thought to be the origins of sitting Shiva in the Jewish culture. When somebody passes away, you go to the house, you visit them, and no one spoke a word to him because they saw how intense his suffering was. I don't know. When was the last time somebody showed up for you like that? These really are friends. Let's not dismiss that. Now, the friendship's going to be tested, and similarly, we will see how they will hit their limit. But here's my question. What happens when that natural empathy of friendship runs out? You know, just like his wife had her limits, these friends have their limits as well, which we will see. Guys, that's it. Job's faithfulness. Put yourself in his shoes. How are you doing with your hardships, your losses? How are you doing in your grief? Are you faithful? Are you like Job? Can you say, should we accept from God only good and not adversity? Will you accept adversity along with the good? Put yourself in his wife's shoes. You see your limits? Can we have compassion on her and not judge her in this situation? Maybe your spouse doesn't understand some things you're going through. Can you still love her? Even if she doesn't understand or he doesn't understand? Put yourself in his friend's shoes. Put yourself in his friend's shoes. I think that's what I said. These are incredible friends. They are going to hit their limit. Peace, guys. Chapter 3 is next.